Hello, everyone. My name is Riley Welch, and today I'm going to be presenting to you about how the role of masculinity has changed in hip hop over time. The role of masculinity in hip hop is an interesting case to study. It has changed significantly since the birth of the hip hop movement. Traditionally, rappers were seen as tough guys who were the manliest of men and held up the image of being a cool guy. Rappers were also seen as being hard. They didn't really show emotions and often rapped about violence and street culture. In a journal on the Harvard Political Review site, the author had this to say when speaking about the traditional role of masculinity in hip hop. Quote, "The artists themselves maintain strict gangster personas. Most of the genre's biggest names, such as Notorious B.I.G. and Jay-Z, were known drug dealers and many were convicted criminals." Quote, "The sort of street culture really manifested itself and created pressure for rappers during this time to fit this certain image." On the flip side, when you look at the hip hop artists of today's era, the rappers are much more expressive and are more inclined to let their guard down and let people see their emotions. According to an article on GarfieldMessenger.org, author Anna Matsubara states, "Artists have stopped adhering to the classical masculine mold of the traditional hip hop artist and have introduced more feminine and emotional features into their music, telling the story of who they are." Artists are not only switching it up with their music, but also with the way they express themselves, with their fashion, personalities, and messages they send. Now let's take a deeper look at how masculinity in hip hop has changed over time by looking at some specific examples. So, taking a closer look, the way I chose to study and dissect this topic was by comparing and contrasting Will Smith's Fresh Prince of BelAir, which was a popular comedy TV series in the 90s and has deep ties with hip hop culture at the time, compared against The Greatest Cooking Show of All Time, featuring well-renowned hip hop artist Tyler the Creator. Okay, let's start with The Fresh Prince of BelAir. Essentially, the premise of the show is that Will Smith played a fictionalized version of himself. He is sent by his mother away from their home in Philadelphia to live with his aunt and uncle in their BelAir mansion. Throughout the show, Will plays a goofy, smooth operating teenager who has a lust for women and a knack for getting himself into sticky situations. Will's character, coming from Philadelphia, feels pressure to act like a tough guy and fit into the street culture role. He often hides his real emotions, specifically his feelings about his father leaving his life, with comedic relief and by playing the tough guy role. In an essay on Carleton Admissions Journal site, there's a senior thesis essay written by a student about the societal pressures that are involved with this show. The student uses episode 3 as a prime example of roles that men involved with hip-hop culture are pressured to play. In this essay, the student states, "In the third episode, 72 Hours, Carlton takes on Will's bet to spend a full day in Compton, a suburb of Los Angeles that boasts a high density of African Americans, and is infamous for its gang violence and poverty. This episode is very significant because it presents a role reversal between Will and Carlton, as Carlton, the middle-class suburban prep school kid, attempts to survive in the hood." Now let's talk about Tyler the Creator's appearance on a cooking show titled The Greatest Cooking Show of All Time. In this show, Tyler the Creator is featured to give us instructions on how to cook cinnamon waffles. In this episode, we see Tyler the Creator cooking in the kitchen and giving step-by-step commentary on how to make these waffles. The fact that Tyler the Creator, being on this show alone, challenges the age-long and outdated traditional roles of masculinity because the kitchen has long been considered a place for women, and the act of cooking is also traditionally compartmentalized as a feminine thing to do. Furthermore, Tyler the Creator plays into this stereotype at the very beginning of the show by kind of getting sassy and acting in feminine ways. He uses feminine hand gestures and a higher tone of voice to simulate this. He also acts completely comfortable and vulnerable, not at all trying to uphold a tough guy image or seem like a cool cat. We see him smiling and laughing a lot, really letting his guard down and enjoying the process. Now, the results and conclusions that I got from this study. The roles of masculinity have changed a lot over time, specifically since the 1980s and 90s. When we look at exactly how it has changed, we see that men in hip hop are becoming traditionally what is seen as more feminine. As we examine the reasons why, maybe the first notion that comes to mind is that we're simply evolving as a society. We have made a lot of progress as a society as far as being more accepting of how people choose to express themselves, particularly with femininity in men and the LGBTQ community. Artists no longer feel as much pressure to adhere to the traditional norms of gender roles within the hip hop community.